The Outer Worlds. Should you buy it? From the creators of games such as Pillars of Eternity, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, and even Fallout New Vegas, we are taking a look at Obsidian's brand new space RPG, The Outer Worlds. If this review helps you in any way, or you want to see more in the future, make sure to leave a like, a comment, or even subscribe. This review will be in a 21:9 aspect ratio to give it that cinematic feel, and also because it's the native resolution of my monitor, which makes it far easier and enjoyable to record. This review, as per usual, will be split into a number of categories, and as always, we'll start with graphics. Let me start by just saying that this game pops. It is incredibly colourful and bright, and really stands out in this regard compared to many other similar games that have a much more dark and gritty vibe. The game also implements a slightly stylized vibe with characters, weapons and objects, which helps to distract from the ever so slightly reduced detail in textures and models. The game is actually pretty breathtaking at times, such as when you first look up at the sky on the first planet, or when you're peering off into space from your ship. You can tell the creators ramped up the glow and intensity of almost every neon and colourful light within the game, which makes every sign, glowing weapon, or similar stand out immensely, in a good way. I wasn't regularly examining and noticing the textures around the place because I was too busy exploring and having fun. But when you do look closely, you can definitely see that the textures aren't quite at the highest quality. During dialogue, when the camera shifts back and forth between characters, the textures on the characters will often unload, then have to reload when the camera switches back to them, which can get a bit annoying at times. Other than that though, I can say that this is an absolutely gorgeous game to look at and admire, with the amazing environments and worlds, and my favourite part is honestly just looking into the skies. The next category is atmosphere and immersion. For many RPG games, the actual immersion takes a bit of a back seat, and this game is definitely no exception in that case. When shooting or attacking enemies, there is damage counters that pop up from the enemy to tell you how much damage your attacks are dealing. This can easily be turned off in the menus if you don't like it, but personally, I kept it on in order to gauge how effective my weapons were. The game also has enemy health bars and their weaknesses and debuffs displayed above their head, which adds to the RPG element but takes away from the immersion element. The game aims to focus a lot more on just having fun and enjoying a good story than a full Metro Exodus style immersion, and honestly, I think it works much better for this type of game. If you are looking to get that extra immersion, just make sure you turn the HUD off. This will add some immersion and also make the game just that little bit more challenging. The atmosphere, on the other hand, feels great because of the variety of a bunch of different locations that range from a moon to a giant space vessel. The atmosphere is constantly changing and each place feels distinctly different and unique. Moving on from that, we have music, sounds, and voice. Starting with music.
You seen Arthur today?
Nah, last time I saw him was done.
The music in this game gives me incredibly strong vibes from both Fallout New Vegas and Knights of the Old Republic. The main menu theme itself makes you not want to even start the game because you just want to sit there and listen to it forever. The music all feels incredibly sci-fi and is beautifully orchestrated and absolutely suits the game perfectly. The music has an air of mystery and intrigue to it, as well as ramping up to literally make it feel like you are on the most epic goddamn space adventure of your life. Then we have the sounds. The sounds in this game come across as relatively standard game sounds. Nothing about them is ridiculously amazing or mind-blowing, but the weapons all sound powerful and unique. The enemies and creatures all have their own distinct growls and noises as well. Bullets make different sounds depending on the surface they hit or impact, and so do the sounds of footsteps. Overall, the sounds in this game are pretty good. And finally, we have voice.
It's a 0G brew extra refreshing. It's an ale that's good for what ails you. Oh, and it's not the best choice, it's Spacer's choice.
I do apologize. I was given no forewarning of your arrival, or I might have welcomed you at the gates myself. I'm Reed Thompson, Outpost Administrator. I cannot help but notice you are not in uniform.
Ah, the charmer. Welcome back. Drink, chat, or business? All of the above? More or less dangerous than a steady supply of alcohol. Give it here.
Obviously, this is an incredibly important aspect in a game, all about talking and story, and my god does this game have a lot of talking, which we'll dive into later. Almost every character you speak to in this game has their own unique accent, way of talking, and little quirk about them, which is absolutely great. Some characters come across as incredibly shifty and untrustworthy almost immediately, whilst others you just feel like you can trust just from one quick conversation with them. There were definitely some conversations that I found myself getting a little bored with, and sometimes even checking my phone whilst the character talked for what felt like an eternity, but this was very rarely. Overall, the voice acting is great and every character feels unique and special, and you can really get a sense of their emotion through every line. Now we move on to what is almost always the largest category of these reviews, and that is gameplay. Is the game actually fun to play? We're going to start off with the aspects of the Outer Worlds that I consider good or effective. First of all, we have the difficulty options. That's right. The first three options are just standard difficulty options, but then we have the dreaded Supernova difficulty. This difficulty could be seen as similar to Fallout 4's survival mode, or possibly Fallout New Vegas' hardcore mode. In this mode, the enemies are harder, you have to eat, drink and sleep to stay alive, companions can die permanently, you can only fast travel to your ship, saving is very limited, and much more included. It's truly an experience designed for those hardcore players out there. There is a variety of weapon and armor modifications that can be used to do everything from add a scope to your plasma carbine, up to making your light machine gun fire electricity. These mods are quite plentiful throughout the game, so you'll have plenty of opportunity to experiment. The skills in this game are also very enjoyable to play around with, and having some pretty awesome effects and results. Personally, I spec'd my character quite heavily into dialogue skills, allowing me to convince characters to give me extra money, or even to convince a guard to let me into a restricted area so I could loot the whole place. There is plenty of variety in the skills, and all of them come in handy one way or another. So whether you want to shoot first, ask questions later, or ask way too many questions, then there's a build for you. Along with this, there are also a variety of perks which allow you to increase health, carrying capacity, and more. As a role-playing mechanic, there is a system called floors. These pop up at random times in-game. For example, if you fall off enough cliffs and keep cracking your legs, you'll have the option to take a floor, which reduces your move speed and a few stats in exchange for a perk point. Personally, I feel as if the negatives outweigh the positives with the floors, so I haven't actually taken a single one yet. There are 6 different companions in this game, all of which have completely different personalities and their own specific companion quests that you can complete for them. You can have up to 2 companions at a time, and they will all provide you with varying different buffs and bonuses to your skills. Companions each have a unique combat ability as well, which can be used once, then needs to recharge. They can also be leveled up and given perks, and they will also chime in during conversations at times if they have something to say about the current situation. There's also a reputation system with the different factions in the game, which allows you to either build up a good rapport by helping them, or make them absolutely hate you by killing them or stealing from them or any of that type of stuff, and these all have a variety of benefits and disadvantages. Another aspect of the game that some of you masochists out there might enjoy is the fact that you can kill basically any character in the game. No matter how important they are. So if the leader of a town is bugging you, just blast his head off and you'll never have to speak to him again. One of my favourite aspects of this game is the TTD system, or tactical time dilation. This is basically an ability which slows down time, allowing you to pinpoint your shots exactly where you want them to hit, and with certain perks it can be made to cause specific damage based on the location you attack. For example, if you shoot most enemies in the face, it'll cause them to be blinded for a few seconds, which basically means that they don't know where you are. Shooting them in the leg may cripple them, causing them to walk slower. There is also an item in the game called the Holographic Shroud, which allows you to collect ID cartridges, which are used to sneak into restricted areas. This item will allow you to look like the faction in that area for a limited amount of time. If you're caught, a guard will question you, and you can usually convince them not to worry about you. You can do this up to 3 times before they will become permanently suspicious, and is a unique approach to infiltration that doesn't require only your stealth skill. One last tiny gameplay aspect I'll mention is that there is unlimited sprint, and it isn't tied down to some form of action point system, which I love. It helps getting around the world a lot easier. Before we move on to the not so good aspects of the game, I'll mention a few that I'm not fully sure about yet. The main aspect in question is the partial open worlds, or hub worlds. The way this game is set up is that there are multiple, relatively unique planets and celestial bodies that can be explored. Some of these are bigger than others, but some of them have a rather limited feeling to them with only 1 or 2 points of interest. In some cases, I actually really enjoyed this, such as on the small asteroid of Scylla, but at other times it felt a little limited, but as I said, that's an aspect I feel like I can't really put in either category. One other aspect that will depend completely on the type of player you are is that there is an absolute ton of talking. At times, I loved hearing the rich lore and narrative within the game, and at other times, I found myself drifting and just wanting to get into the action. Obviously, this can be skipped if you hate dialogue, but we know for a fact that Obsidian excels in their storytelling and quests. Overall, I'd say for the type of game it is, this is a positive, but at times it felt almost excessive. Now, onto the aspects that I'm not the biggest fan of. Now, this doesn't mean that they make the game terrible or that they are absolutely a game breaker, but they're just a few things that I wasn't too keen on. First of all, we have weapon and armor durability. Now don't worry, it's not half as bad as games such as Breath of the Wild or even some of the Fallout games. It seems like it's not actually too prevalent in the game, which kind of just makes it feel like an unnecessary hassle at times to see that your weapon or your armor is slightly weaker just because it's lost a bit of condition. Kind of just gets in the way. Sometimes when you try to climb on top of an object or some low terrain, an invisible wall will stop you, despite not looking like it should be able to. To be honest, it happened quite a few times while I was trying to get into the high ground during a fight, and kinda just breaks the feeling a little bit. A few times I felt like the game needed some sort of flashlight, as there were some areas that just seemed too dark and would have benefited from something like that. Last up, we have just a minor grievance, and that is the fact that there are constantly small little items scattered around that just require you to move around and be looking directly at them in order to pick them up. For example, when there's a whole collection of bit cartridges on the ground, which is the money in this game, you have to monotonously pick one by one up instead of just being able to kind of collect them all, and it just becomes a bit of a hassle. And then we move on to the content category. This is where we talk about how long the game actually is, depending on how you decide to play. As usual, we'll be using the website How Long to Beat in order to work out the times. If you were the type of person to just power through the main story and not worry about side quests, then the game will take you around 11 hours. Now you may be thinking, that's such a short game, but who jumps onto an RPG like this and ignores all the side quests? Like, come on. There are so many side quests in this game, and most of the time, I couldn't tell if I was doing a side quest or a main quest, so they definitely hold up. If you were to do some extra quests and exploration, then the game will take you around 21 to 22 hours. Or if you decide to go all out completionist, then the game should take you around 34 hours to complete. Personally, I've been taking my time with this game, exploring and completing all the quests that I come across, and it feels like I have been playing forever at this point, so don't worry, it's definitely not a 4-hour campaign. And of course, we have to speak about the game's performance. I was running the game on a GTX 1080 at a 3440 by 1440 resolution, and this game seemed to stay above 60 FPS at most times with the settings turned down just a little. Honestly, I think most decent modern rigs will be able to handle this game relatively easily, especially at 1080 HD. Occasionally in some towns or on some planets, the frames seem to take a little bit of a hit and drop below 60, but nothing overly noticeable if you're not using a frame rate counter. There is also a surprisingly small amount of bugs in this game, and I personally think I only actually saw one in my whole time playing. And that bug was basically just a character sitting slightly in the ground rather than higher up, so it was not even that noticeable unless I walked straight up to him. For those curious about the ultrawide support, majority of all the gameplay is in full ultrawide, with the dialogue limited to 16:9, but I'll leave a link to a fix I downloaded in the description below to make the dialogue in 21:9. The final category we have is story. Now before you panic, I'll be aiming not to spoil anything from the story in this section. Your character is saved from a colony ship called Hope, which has been left abandoned and floating in space. You then have to make your way throughout the Halcyon colony of planets to stop the big corporations and save your fellow colonists. You will meet companions and allies along the way who will help you achieve this goal. As I mentioned before, the side quests are almost indistinguishable from the main quest and often helps tie everything in together, so overall, the storytelling and the story is well done. And now, the main event, the overall verdict of the game. This game is an incredibly enjoyable and in-depth RPG and first-person shooter. The characters drew me in with the rich lore and narrative, and despite sometimes losing focus, they always got me back in. The quests, story, and dialogue are all well done, and there are plenty of gameplay features and an in-depth skill system to keep you playing. Despite some of the worlds feeling a little confined or limited, there is still plenty to explore and discover at every destination. This game is almost exactly what comes to mind when you think first-person space RPG. This game is currently $59.99 US on the Epic Games Store. Now, before you get upset about the Epic Games Store, like I know most people do, it is also available on the Microsoft Store for the same price, but, even better, this game is fully available on the Xbox Game Pass. That's right, if you have an Xbox One or a PC, you can play this game from as little as $1 a month if you're new to Game Pass, or between $5 and $10 if you're an existing or past member. So, should you buy The Outer Worlds? If you've been a massive fan of Obsidian's RPGs such as KOTOR 2 or Fallout New Vegas, then I think this game is almost certainly a must. If you're even a bit of a fan of RPG type games, then I still think you will have an absolute ball playing this game. In other words, I would 100% recommend getting this game, especially on Xbox Game Pass like I did, as I literally can't think of a single reason not to pay $1 measly to try out this game and hundreds more for a whole month. And that way, if you decide you don't like it, you've only spent $1. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed my review of The Outer Worlds. I'm going to try and keep doing reviews a bit more often when I can, since they seem to do relatively well and you guys seem to enjoy them. If you guys enjoyed this video, think about leaving a like or even subscribing, as everything like that really helps me out when it comes to making videos for you guys. And peace out everybody.